Hello, I'm Julia George. This is the Sunday Politics for the South East. Coming up later, as the Labour Party meet in Brighton for their annual conference, we'll be speaking to the party leader, Ed Miliband, about whether scrapping the bedroom tax, as they call it, really is a vote winner here in the South East. Joining me in the studio today to talk about this and our other issues are the Green leader of Brighton Council, Jason Kitcat, and Labour's prospective parliamentary candidate for Hastings and Rye, Sarah Owen. Lovely to have you both with us. Let's talk about those promises. Free school meals from the Liberal Democrats, and as we just said, Labour promises to scrap what they call the bedroom tax. Party conference season is bringing out some interesting promises. So what about the smaller parties? The Greens met last weekend. This weekend it's the turn of the UK Independence Party. They're a big force in South East politics now. Jason, you must be jealous as another smaller party. Jealous of what they've achieved?
Jealous of UKIP? No, not quite. I mean, I think most European countries have had this kind of far-right party for a long time, and in one sense this is just a natural evolution of the breakdown of big party machine politics.
Voters in this country see them as far-right.
Well, they are, and they don't have any principal authorities that they control, and, you know, they are a protest vote, and they're not actually serious about taking power. We see once they actually get power, they fall apart. Well, how many MEPs have they lost?
Let's consider about how people might vote. If Labour wins seats, Sarah, without increasing their vote, but UKIP has split the Conservative vote, it's not much of a mandate for Ed Miliband, is it?
Well, in Hastings and Rye, for the last few elections that we've had since 2010, we have increased our share of the vote. In the last consecutive 2 years of elections, we've seen a 42% share of the vote for Labour across Hastings and Rye.
That's local elections. That's not, you know, we have no measure for how they're going to vote in terms of national politics.
No, and what we do see, though, is a lot of disaffected Tories going to UKIP, and it's a lot of the same voters as well that possibly would have voted Green. It's an anti-politics message, so we'll be seeing some of that as well.
OK, thank you. It's an issue that's had voices, big and small, united across Kent. The campaign to stop the proposed closure of 23 out of 97 of the county's children's centres. Under fives and their parents have been joined by 2 Tory MPs who say these vital facilities must be saved. But after 3 years of cuts, the council still needs to make huge savings of £240 million. So can we really expect all our services to remain untouched? Bhavani Vadi looks at the argument.
Moving and shaking, this free drop-in session gives toddlers a chance to let off steam. It's taking place at the Village Children's Centre in Folkestone. But less than a mile away is the Folkestone Early Years Centre, which offers similar activities. Now, Kent County Council says it just can't afford to run both because it needs to save millions over the next few years. 10 times the number of people using this centre borrow books from the local library, and the council says when resources are tight, it has to prioritise.
These are really tough decisions to make. I didn't come into politics to close children's centres, but we've got to the point now where we've cut as much fat off the bone as we can, and we're now having to look at the quality and the availability of frontline services for the people who desperately need them.
Sure Start centres like this were first set up in the late 90s under Labour to provide early childhood services and support for parents. But the council says the grant for early years intervention has been cut by a third over the last 4 years.
Kent County Council points out it's already cut £340 million from budgets, and this week councillors met to discuss a further £240 million worth of cuts over the next 3 years. It's frontline services like this that are now bearing the brunt. Many parents are upset about the planned changes, but some understand the need for them.
I wouldn't want any services to be cut, ideally. But I guess if they're going, you know, as long as they can assure us that, you know, we'll all receive the same level of support, then I guess, you know, it may work.
Somewhere has got to close down, but it depends on which one, doesn't it?
There must be some of these children's centres that are used more than others. In an economic climate like we've got now, then you don't need to keep things that aren't being used. This one is. This one is being used, and this one's popular.
The council's consultation about the changes ends next week. It's taken a year to examine how children's centres are used. 16 new lead centres will open near families that may need greater support, and the number of health visitors will be doubled to carry out more home visits. Despite these assurances, there have been high-profile campaigns against the proposed closures. Some Kent MPs are fighting against cuts to services in their patch after voting for austerity measures in Parliament.
MPs will always seek to defend their constituents, even if they're doing so against a council led by their own party. They don't lose by doing it. They make themselves popular in their constituencies and they know what the outcome will be. The cuts will go ahead anyway. It's a bit of posturing.
But some in local government say this doesn't help.
I would make a plea to our parliamentarians, the MPs, that please look at the reduced funding situation that local authorities are facing. Please listen to us, because we cannot protect services at their current level if we don't get the appropriate funding from government.
So we've got children, young people...
And Kent's not the only authority that's had to face tough decisions. In East Sussex, some children's centres were also merged.
We would all like to do everything for everybody. We certainly don't have that luxury. And the country can't afford it, we can't afford it. But more importantly, we need to concentrate on the most needy and the people that benefit most from that. And of course there is criticism, because at the end of the day, people have come to expect everything to be done for them. We have a political choice to make based on the envelope of cash we have, with the services that we have to provide. If you don't do this, you'll have to do something else.
As local governments across the South East struggle to balance the books, the tough funding decisions they face are not proving popular. But what real alternatives do they have?
Life is but a dream. Gordon Henderson is a Kent MP who's fighting to save Woodgrove Children's Centre. I asked him about his concerns.
I'll tell you what I'm worried about. Woodgrove has a huge challenge, and that is it's to try to get to parents who need early intervention, and it's not reaching those at the moment. The parents it's reaching are getting good service, and there's 600 children in that school that would actually lose out. What we've got to do though is to reach beyond those to other people, and I fear that if we close Woodgrove and we're not reaching them now, we won't ever reach them. So that's one of my concerns about closing Woodgrove.
Why do you think this centre in particular needs saving? Because Kent County Council research, even just staying in your constituency, says 2/3 of the people who use Woodgrove use other children's centres as well. There are 3 others in your constituency, and some of these are very close by.
Well, there are some way away. Don't forget the people who we would need to reach, the people who use these centres, often don't have their own transport. And we have to ask ourselves, why are they going to other centres? They're going to other centres because those centres offer services that Woodgrove don't. What we ought to do is increase the amount of services at Woodgrove.
OK, so tell me about the things that happen at Woodgrove that are invaluable. What one thing is the most important service that happens there?
Well, at Woodgrove, it's one of the things they do there, a good innovation, for instance, is they have a community chef going in there to show parents how they can provide nutritious meals at an inexpensive price to their children.
But that could happen anywhere. It doesn't have to happen at Woodgrove.
No, it doesn't have to happen at Woodgrove. Absolutely right. And it does happen elsewhere because that community chef goes to other places. But the point I'm making is that Kent County Council itself have recognised and have given a commitment, for instance, that they won't cut any centres in areas of high deprivation, such as Thanet. I would argue that Woodgrove, out of the centres in my area, is one of those in the most deprived, one of the most deprived areas of Sydney.
So would you be happy if another one closed instead? I mean, what is the best scenario here for you? You want that one to stay open. What about, I mean, if that one stays open, some say a different one has to close. Do you care about all the children in Kent or just the ones in your constituency?
Well, obviously I care about all the children in Kent, but I actually first and foremost care about I'm a Member of Parliament for Sittingbourne and Sheppey. I don't speak for the rest of Kent. I speak for the people here in Sittingbourne and Sheppey because they are my constituents. So I have to concentrate my efforts on those, and I do it unashamedly. And it's not posturing; it's actually because I actually care about my constituents.
We'll come back to the posturing in a moment. Why not take the fight to the government? Kent County Council has already made, as we saw in the film, hundreds of millions of pounds of cuts. They're talking about hundreds of millions more pounds of cuts here. Have you asked David Cameron, for instance, why he's broken his pre-election promise on looking after Sure Start Children's Centres? Because you could be taking this argument to central government. Instead, you're giving Kent County Council a hard time.
I'm going to. I'm actually going to write to David Cameron and remind him that he said before the general election that no Sure Start centres would close. We had questions in Parliament last week when the opposition spokesman actually asked the same question, and the response we got from government was that no Sure Starts centres are closing. What they're doing is that they are amalgamating or they're rationalising administration.
So you think the government is actually not really coming clean on this?
I actually think that some parts of government don't obviously understand what's actually happening on the ground. So I will be actually making it clear that these centres are closing, and if we are going to be honest, we need to explain why they're closing. Yeah, they are closing for financial reasons, but there must, take Kent as a whole, there must be areas of more affluent than my own constituency where children's centres could open.
So let's be really clear, just final question here. Is the big fight here with Kent County Council or with the government?
No, the big fight here is, I think, with government.
Gordon Henderson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jason Kidcat, you've kept all your children's centres open.
Yes.
So far.
Yes, we have.
Will they all always stay open under the Greens?
I would hope so, but really it's unforeseeable at the moment because we have this unbelievable level of cuts being put down on us, and what we see is this consensus in Westminster between Conservatives, Lib Dems and Labour that councils will be cut until 2020. There is this austerity consensus. So finally, Gordon Henderson realised that the problem is central government.
Did you find that revelatory, a Tory MP saying that the government was the problem?
In private, many MPs and almost every council leader of every party think we are in an unsustainable position if the cuts keep being pushed down. 28% cuts on average to funding for councils. Only 8% has been taken out of Whitehall. That's not fair and it's not sustainable.
But all of the problems that you've had since you've been the party in control of Brighton and Hove City, you can't blame them on austerity. The bin men strike, the infighting, the inflation-busting parking charges. It hasn't always gone well, and you can't always blame the government and austerity.
No, absolutely. You know, first time ever running a principal authority, some mistakes were made. But I think the fact that we've delivered or on course to deliver 3/4 of our manifesto promises only halfway through our term shows that we are actually committed to delivering what we got elected for.
Has it been a revelation to you, being in power? Has it been more frustrating, more difficult than you expected?
Oh, well, of course, it's been a learning process. It's new for our party. But I think there is a long history of central government passing down the pain to local government to try and put some political water. And we saw, you know, the MP here trying to do that, saying, oh, it's the council. And finally, at least he was honest enough to fess up and say, actually, we have a government who are overly centralising and cutting again and again and again, and protest at the council level will only take you so far, because the fundamental system is broken.
Sarah Owen, you were making some interesting noises when we were listening to Keith Glazier. We took it on to the point about East Sussex and what they're doing with children's centres. What's your understanding of what's happening?
Well, having a look at the East Sussex County Council budget, they're looking to cut over £1 million from children's centres. And although I don't agree with what Kent are doing in terms of the number of cuts they're going to have there, at least they've been upfront about what they're cutting and how they're cutting. We heard from Keith Glazier, but he didn't actually say anything about how this is going to impact on children's centres.
Perhaps they're going to spend a year looking at it like Kent did.
Well, I think that they've already set the budget. They should have known, they should have been upfront about what it is they're losing. And although Brighton have kept all their care centres open, they're no longer universally available for everyone. So it's changed the ethos of children's centres altogether.
Essentially, every level of government these days is about deciding where the axe falls, isn't it? That's it. That's what governing's about.
Well, I think clearly there are efficiencies to be had, and we've been able to protect a lot by finding the way to deliver services that are as good, if not better than before, for less money. That is part of it, but that can only go so far, and at the speed and rate, I think, sadly, that is part of what is happening in government, and that's why I'm so worried that until 2020 we have all three parties in Westminster saying that's what's going to happen.
Let's see what Labour are promising. Let's see what they're promising next, because the Labour Party meet in Brighton. They'll be thinking hard about that big date on the horizon. 7th of May 2015. Might seem a long way away to you, not for them. Polling day for the next general election. In the South East, Labour faces, well, quite a challenge. At the last election, the party lost all 7 of their seats. Ed Miliband has been talking to our political editor, Louise Stewart. She started by asking, does Labour really know what voters want?
Well, I think we're talking firmly on your side.
Ed Miliband, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
OK, let's turn to Sarah. Vote Labour because we're going to repeal the bedroom tax, or to put it another way, we plan to continue using your money to fund a spare room for people who live in social housing. That is not a vote winner, is it?
Well, across the board, the bedroom tax has been wholly unpopular, not just with people that it's affecting. Everybody that I've spoken to either knows somebody that has lost out because of it, or they think that it's genuinely unfair to penalise disabled people who need that spare room.
But is it going to win you votes? When you stand on the doorstep in Hastings or Rye and you say to people, we're going to repeal the bedroom tax. Are they going to vote for you because of that?
Well, when I was knocking on doors in Rye a couple of weeks ago, the bedroom tax came up in every other house that I knocked on. And so, yes, it is a huge issue, but it's more than that. It's about the cost of living.
What's going to be the big announcement on the cost of living? This is where you're going to announce a living wage?
We have already done a lot of work on the living wage. We've got more Labour councils signed up to living wage. I think we've got 15 now accredited.
But you need a big announcement at your party conference. Which area is it going to come in?
Well, that's going to come from Ed Miliband, so you'll have to watch his speech.
But you know what he's going to say, right? You know, and you're positive. You think that he's got a vote-winning announcement in his speech coming.
Hugely positive. And when people say about Labour in the South East, it's not a case of can we win? We are winning in the South East. We've got a lot of momentum already. We've got more Labour councillors than we've ever had in Hastings. We've got 23 out of 32. Yes, no MPs, but there hasn't been a general election since 2010.
Are you going to win your seat?
We are working incredibly hard to win that seat, yes. And the work that we're doing at the moment with campaigns across Royal Mail, the NHS, and indeed the bedroom tax and housing, they're really appealing to people across the board, not just Labour voters.
Let's look at the target seats. Labour has issued these hard targets. Now, interestingly, the 3 Brighton and Hove constituencies are all in there. Jason, how do you keep a foothold in the city when Labour's trying to storm Brighton and Hove?
Well, I think clearly Labour set out the conditions for the economic problems we're in now, and I don't think people are going to forgive and forget as quickly as Ed Miliband would like.
So you think Caroline Lucas will still be an MP after the next election?
A fantastic chance of actually having a greater majority than she did last time.
Even with your reputation as quite a chaotic leader at Brighton City Council.
I don't think that is the reputation. You'd like to say that, but I mean, ultimately, bedroom tax is a terrible regressive move, but it's a tiny measure in the grand scheme of the economic chaos that this country's inherited for Labour.
You two won't compete, against each other at the next election. But I have an interesting question. In the past, you've described yourself, Sarah, as growing up in a very socialist environment. Jason, I know from talking to you on the programme before, you see the Greens as the new socialists. Tell them, if you would, the real socialist here, step forward.
Well, I think Jason's actually more of a mango you've been described as, and I'm much more of a watermelon.
I don't think that language is helpful, and I don't identify with that. I think actually green politics is a different kind of politics that reaches across all of those kind of labels.
There are no socialists sitting here apparently today. Now, a roundup of the other political events that you might have missed over the summer. Here's Ed Baranski.
West Sussex Council's attempts to evict anti-fracking protesters from Volcombe were flawed, according to a High Court judge. The council says it will respect the ruling. The protesters are delighted.
They had better wake up, because rural communities throughout Sussex and Kent will not stand for this policy.
Sussex MP Tim Loughton has been criticised for saying former Families Minister Sarah Tether doesn't believe in family because she never produced one. Loughton said his words were distorted and not meant to be personal. Medway Council hopes Chatham's historic dockyards will become a World Heritage Site by 2014. The council's plans to win the unique status were put to public consultation this week. And finally, something's been causing a stink in Tonbridge. A local deodorant factory has caused a sickly smell to waft across the town. Residents are calling on Tonbridge Council to act.
A very pungent, chemical, sweet smell, as though a sweet factory has exploded.
Fortunately, nothing has actually exploded, and the council says the smells aren't harmful.
A great description of the smell in Tonbridge. Let's go back to fracking. Barely a Sunday politics goes by where we don't talk about it. UKIP have come out and said you're an eco-freak if you're opposed to fracking. What do you make of that?
Well, they are climate change deniers. I mean, they're a fringe party. I mean, ultimately, it's very clear that both the geology and the market would not support the wide-scale fracking that George Osborne thinks it would. It is damaging to the environment, and there's clear opposition across the board. That's why we declared our city frack-free. OK, you both had a huge intake of breath when you heard what Tim Loughton said about Sarah Tether. Is that ever appropriate to make that sort of personal comment in politics?
Not at all. That has no place in modern-day politics at all. That level of misogyny and sexism towards, well, even if it is a Lib Dem, that's just not on.
OK. Enjoy party conference. We look forward to hearing what that pledge is going to be from Ed Miliband. Couldn't get it out of her. That's all we've got time for from the South East this week. My thanks, of course, to our guests, Jason Kitcat and Sarah Owen. Natalie's back next week with our very own interview with the Prime Minister. You don't get better than that. See you soon.